Hey, what's going on YouTube? My name is Kieran Tross, and I am your host for today for the Tech Life Podcast. This is episode 3, where I'm going to talk to you about how to study for IT certification. So, in this video, I really want to talk about where you're coming from, right? So you may be coming from, switching careers, or you're trying to get into something new, or perhaps you're just saying, hey, you know what, I need to get an IT certification because I hear the certifications are what these jobs are looking for. Or you've probably been looking at IT jobs and you're noticing some certain certifications keep populating in your search. So for me, I have a ton of IT certifications. I also have 2 degrees. What I would say to you is both of them help each other out. But if you're trying to get into IT in this day and age, I think you can get in with just IT certifications. So how do you go about studying for the IT certification? So the first thing I would say is find out exactly which path you're going. So if you're going for cybersecurity, CISSP is a good one to get into and really study for. If you're going for AWS, Microsoft Azure, which, obviously I'm an Azure shop over here with Cloud Scholars, then you want to, figure out that whole learning path. So how do I go about studying for certifications? So the first thing that I do is I put a date down, right? So I say, hey, by this time, let's say 3 months in advance, I will already have taken my test and I will have to pass. That gives you it makes sure that you stay on a study regimen. And to me, that has worked out for me for years. So I always say, okay, this is the end date. Think about it. When you're in school, you graduated or you finished, 7th grade, 8th grade, whatever, by June of 23rd or whatever time they end school, right? Depending on part of the country you're at, it might be late May or whatever. And what that does is it forces the school system to say, okay, by this time you're studying this, by this time you're learning this, by this time you're taking this, and this time you're taking the test. You want to do the same thing. You want to make sure that you're putting an end date for your goals, and that's for everything in life. Because if you don't, then you're just going to keep going and lollygagging and say, okay, well, I'll get to it tomorrow. So it forces you to kind of get into a regimen, right? The next thing I will tell you to do is make sure you are studying every single day or at least 5 days a week, just so that you can achieve your goal. And you may say to yourself, well, I've got kids, I've got a job, I've got this. If you don't study, you're still going to have all that stuff, right? So you have to knuckle down and really get to going with what you need to do. So I like this whole thing where I always tell my friends, I'm like, listen, an hour a day. So if you do an hour a day of studying, what happens is at first you're going, oh man, I gotta do this for an hour. And when you get off work, you can say, all right, instead of, watching TV or scrolling on Instagram or doing whatever on social media, put down the phone and do an hour a day. So that's when the kids go to sleep, after you finish bathing them, feeding them, and they go to sleep. Then sit down in a quiet place, put your phone in airplane mode and say, okay, from 7 to 8 or from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, instead of turning on the TV and watching something or going through some type of streaming service, Netflix, say to yourself, I'm going to sit down, dedicate that time to me for improving me professionally. So sit down from 9 to 10 o'clock, and then once you're done doing that, go to the next day, do the same thing. Go to the next day, do the same thing. I guarantee you, by the time you get through the first week and get to the second week, you're probably going to do an hour and a half. Then you're going to do 2 hours. And it helps you out. And what I like to do is I'll learn something on Monday, write down some notes, type it up. And then on Tuesday, I'll go through what I just learned on Monday as a refresher and then learn something new. And then on Wednesday, I'll have from Monday and Tuesday, I'll do that as a refresher and then learn something new. By the time you get to like the 3rd week, you have read over your notes over, so a point that while you're reading it, you're just saying it over and over in your head, and it definitely helps out. So this whole hour a day and then also taking down your notes and reading over your notes definitely helps you out. Another suggestion that I have is, where are you learning from? So there's a lot of free material out there. There's blogs out there if you like to read. Everybody has their own way of reading, or not reading, but of learning and understanding new skill sets. So for instance, you may say, okay, you know what, I'm going to read a little bit here, or I might watch videos. Some people like watching videos. You're watching video right now. So you may want to go on YouTube and find somebody that talks in your language, somebody who's able to articulate the information for you. So for me, when I'm teaching on YouTube, on Cloud Scholars, what I like to do is I like to break down information so that this way anybody can digest the information and into the most layman terms. Some videos are a little bit harder to do that because of how complicated the topic is. But I try to break it down as much as possible because at the end of the day, I want you to digest it. So what I would recommend you do is if you're learning something new and you're trying to get an IT certification, if let's say you're learning about, I don't know, EC2s, right? Virtual machines. You may learn from instructor 1 and then learn the same thing from instructor 2 and then learn the same thing from instructor 3. Because by the time you get to the third instructor, they're all saying the same thing, but they just have different flavors of, providing that information to you. So get an understanding from different instructors when you're going for a certification. So one thing I would tell you is if you can take a Udemy certification, you may go through a Udemy course. And by the end of the course, you may say, oh, I'm ready to take a test. Not quite yet, because there's so much information for you to understand when it comes to that certification that one instructor may not cover everything for you. So let's say, for instance, Microsoft Azure. There's a ton of different things. So if you're going for any of these cloud certifications, what I would say is go on Microsoft's website and say, okay, let me look at the syllabus and make sure I have an understanding of each of the items in this syllabus. There's a ton of different resources out there that you can go through just to learn about whatever certification you're trying to obtain. So those are some of the guidances that I would say in order for you to get your certification. And one of the last things that I want to talk about is actually doing the work. The theory, getting an understanding of the theory is great, but you also want to make sure that you're thinking about once you get the certification, what happens when you get the job. And they're not going to ask you the same questions as the certification is going to ask you, right? You have 4 options on the test when you're taking a certification, let's just say Microsoft Azure, and you can do a process of elimination. For a job, they're not going to do the same thing, right? And you also want to make sure that you get into that mindset when it comes to these certifications as well. So don't just look at the videos and take notes. I would say spin up some resources within Azure or AWS or whatever place you're trying to get certification in, if it's applicable, and try to actually do the work. A lot of these platforms, they'll give you some credit. So I'm staying and kind of talking more about cloud, but they'll give you some credit, and you can get away with spinning up some resources and have your $200 credit from Microsoft. And if, let's just say, you're running low on it and you're still not understanding, just create another email and then do another one, so this way you can get a better understanding if you're trying to save on money. Some people may not have the funds like that, so that's a route that you can go ahead and you could try. Another thing is the practice test. Practice tests help you get an understanding of how the real actual test is going to go. Right? You get the practice test, they get you the understanding of saying, okay, they ask questions a certain way. And sometimes you can have a practice test that asks you questions, and when you get to take the certification, when you're actually there in front of the proctor, that you're like, oh crap, this is similar to the question that I studied for, and it'll help you pass. So practice tests are good, getting some hands-on experience is good, stay into a study regimen, saying, okay, listen, I am going to study an hour a day for 5 days a week. Definitely helps you out. And make sure that you are putting down a date on your calendar and, saying, okay, listen, by this date, I'm taking the certification. If you take the certification 3 weeks before, then that's perfectly fine. You may feel good about it. Every time I've taken an IT certification, there's always been like a chime going off in my head saying, okay, you're ready to take the test. So make sure that you do that. And then on the night of the certification, make sure you get good enough sleep. Don't try to, cram the night before, because if you keep cramming over and over on the night before, what happens is you're just going to end up making a mistake. Or even before the test, some people are studying before the test. I don't think that's good. If you stay with the study regimen for 2 months and then you take your test, I think that you should be in good shape. So that's it when it comes to tips for taking your IT certification. Once again, my name is Kieran Tross. I hope this information I provided to you was beneficial. And as always, I like to end all these videos where it comes to the Tech Life podcast is something motivational for you. So what I'm going to say to you is Without goals and plans to reach them, you are like a ship that has set sail with no destination. So make sure that your goals, you have a plan for it, and you execute the plan. So I hope the information I provide you is beneficial, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you, and see you soon.